King Robert's voice echoed in the throne room like thunder wrapped in wine. "The boy needs someone real," he'd said after watching his son slap a serving girl for pouring wine too slow. "Not some stiff, armored fool who'd rather polish his sword than teach sense." That's how Sandor Clegane became Prince Joffrey's only shield, his sworn sword, his shadow. At first, the boy hated it. Joffrey wanted Ser Barristan, wanted someone elegant, with polished armor and tales of glory. Instead, he got the Hound, scarred face, broken voice, and dead eyes. A man who didn't bow or flatter. A man who looked at the boy like he was a squirming insect he was forced to carry. But Robert was king, and when he roared, everyone listened, especially Cersei. Joffrey had no choice. The first time Sandor walked Joffrey to his training yard, the prince demanded a litter. Sandor didn't answer. He just stared, long, quiet, the way a butcher might stare at a goat before the knife. "You deaf dog?" I said. "You've got legs," Sandor growled. "Use 'em." Joffrey flushed red, but he walked. Every step a wound to his pride. That was the first lesson. From that day, things changed in small, quiet cracks. Not because Joffrey wanted to, but because the Hound wasn't afraid of him. When Joffrey tried to have a stable boy whipped, Sandor threw him into a horse trough instead. "You'll rot if you don't learn," he said, as the boy choked on water and rage. Cersei tried to interfere once. She summoned Sandor to her chambers. "You humiliate the prince," she hissed. Sandor didn't kneel. "He needs it. He needs respect. He needs fear." They stared at each other for a long moment. Cersei didn't speak again. Even she could feel the weight of Sandor's presence. Not respect, not honor, just something dangerous. Something too broken to be controlled. Joffrey started to watch Sandor closely. The boy noticed things no one else told him. That the Hound never smiled. That he drank only enough to stay sharp. That he never bowed unless he had to. And even then, it looked like a threat. Joffrey began to mimic him. At first poorly. He growled at servants, tried to walk with a swagger that didn't suit his golden curls. But over time, the Hound's silence taught him more than any maester ever could. Joffrey learned to shut up, learned to listen, learned that power wasn't in shouting, it was in making others afraid to speak. And when he slapped Sansa once, Sandor grabbed his wrist mid-air. "You ever raise a hand to her again," he whispered, "and I'll break it." Joffrey had never been touched like that before. Not by a servant, not by anyone. It burned worse than shame, but he didn't raise his hand again. Later that night, he didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, staring at the fire in his chambers. And for the first time he asked himself, what made the Hound like that? He wanted to know. Because deep down, he feared him. And somewhere even deeper, he wanted to be him. Years passed. Robert drank himself to death. Ned Stark lost his head. War cracked the Seven Kingdoms like dry earth. And Joffrey, still cruel, still cold, was different in one way. He wasn't stupid anymore, because the Hound had taught him what fear could do, but also how to survive. And when the throne room burned with rebellion and whispers of dragons, the boy king sat on the Iron Throne not with a smirk, but with Sandor standing behind him, eyes cold, hand on his sword. The day Tyrion Lannister arrived at King's Landing, he noticed the shift instantly. The throne room felt colder, quieter, more dangerous. And not just because of the war brewing across the land. No, it was something else. It was the Hound. He didn't just stand behind Joffrey like a guard. He hovered like a shadow, silent, tense, like a beast waiting for someone to make the wrong move. Even Tyrion, who'd grown up around monsters in silks and lyres in armor, felt his stomach tighten under that stare. "You've grown," Tyrion said to Joffrey after bowing to the king he now had to serve as hand. "And you've shrunk," Joffrey replied, the corner of his mouth twitching. But there was no smile, no giggle, just ice. Tyrion blinked. That wasn't the same brat he remembered mocking whores and playing with knives. He glanced at Sandor. The scarred Hound didn't blink, didn't speak, just watched. Later that evening, Tyrion spoke to Varys over wine. "There's something wrong with the boy," he said, frowning into his cup. Varys sipped carefully. "Or perhaps something terribly right." "What do you mean?" "Joffrey used to be loud, predictable, a storm that cried before it struck. But now," Varys shivered lightly, "now he's silent before he cuts. He looks trained." "Trained by a dog," Tyrion muttered. Varys nodded. "A dangerous one." And it was true. Joffrey had changed, not softened, not grown kind, but smarter, calculated, the kind of king who didn't scream at court. He observed, he let others speak and watched how their eyes moved, how their fingers twitched, and when someone lied, Sandor would step forward. Just one step, just enough. That was enough. The small council noticed. Littlefinger became more careful. Pycelle nearly shit himself when Joffrey called him old and slow to his face, and nobody laughed. Only Sandor tilted his head, half approving. But the real shift happened when Sansa was dragged to the throne room for a public apology. Joffrey had ordered her to confess her treasonous blood after Robb Stark was named king in the north. Sansa stood tall, trembling, eyes wide with betrayal and grief. Joffrey looked down at her sitting on the throne, golden crown catching the torchlight. "Speak," he said coldly. She opened her mouth, then stopped, because Sandor had stepped forward again, not toward her, but toward Joffrey. The boy king didn't look back. He didn't need to. He just raised one hand and waved it lazily. "Leave her," he said. And that was it. No beating, no humiliation, just silence. Sansa stared at him, confused. She didn't thank him. She didn't trust him. She couldn't. Not after what she'd seen. But she noticed the way Joffrey's jaw tensed when he dismissed her. That night, she found a note under her pillow. A single sentence, scrawled in messy script. "The dog bites only when I command." She didn't sleep. Elsewhere, Sandor sat outside the king's chambers, sharpening his blade. The sound, steel against stone, was like a lullaby in the Red Keep now. Constant, comforting, in a twisted way. Inside, Joffrey sat alone, staring at his reflection in a polished goblet. "I could have had her whipped," he muttered. Sandor didn't reply. "She's still a traitor's daughter." Still no reply. Joffrey turned to him, voice colder now. "Why do you stop me?" Sandor looked up, tired. "Because you're not stupid. A scared king lashes out. A strong one waits, makes him sweat." Joffrey's mouth curled. "You taught me that. I taught you a lot." Silence stretched again. Then the boy whispered, "Would you die for me?" Sandor met his eyes. "No." Joffrey didn't flinch, just nodded. That night, Varys wrote a raven to Dorne. 3 words only. The boy learns. The streets of King's Landing reeked of sweat, blood, and whispers. The war raged far beyond the city gates, but inside the Red Keep, a different war brewed. Quieter, but just as deadly. Joffrey wasn't just playing king anymore. He was learning how to rule, or more accurately, how to manipulate. And Sandor Clegane, scarred and silent, had become both his blade and his leash. But no one could leash chaos forever. It began with Myrcella. The day she was sent to Dorne, Cersei screamed until her voice broke. She clawed at Tyrion in front of the entire court, swearing he'd ruined everything. But Joffrey said nothing. He watched his sister sail away like a statue carved from ice. Later, when Cersei stormed into his chambers, ready to throw her fury, she found Sandor standing just inside the door. "You can't keep my son from me," she spat. "You're in his way," Sandor said flatly. Cersei's face twisted, but something in Sandor's eyes made her stop. She'd seen those eyes once before, long ago, on a wolfhound that had mauled a child for touching its food. Joffrey sat calmly at the table, sipping wine like a grown man. "You sent her away," Cersei hissed. "You let him send your sister away like a bargaining chip." "I'm the king," Joffrey replied. "You've told me that enough times. It's time I act like one." You're a boy, Joffrey's voice dropped. I was a boy. The war made sure of that. Cersei left in stunned silence. That night, she drank alone. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the lioness. She felt like the prey. And then, the riots came. It was during a feast. Joffrey had thrown bread to the crowd like they were pigeons in the square, laughing when they fought for crumbs. He pointed. He mocked. And when someone threw dung at him and missed, striking Sansa instead, he snapped. "Kill them all!" he screamed. And in that moment, the prince they all feared, the cruel boy with the golden crown, returned in full. The crowd surged, stones flew, screams broke out. The high septon was pulled to pieces, Ser Lancel was knocked off his horse, and Sansa, poor, fragile Sansa, was lost in the chaos. Joffrey panicked. He screamed for guards. They ran. He screamed for his mother. She wasn't there, but Sandor was. The Hound didn't wait for orders. He mounted his horse, face like death, and rode straight into the riot. Fire, fists, blood. None of it mattered. He crushed skulls with his shield, cut down men like wheat, eyes always searching for the girl the king didn't command him to save, but the one he had to. When he found Sansa, she was cornered by 3 men, torn dress, bleeding lip. One of them was already unbuckling his pants. Sandor didn't say a word. He didn't shout. He didn't warn them. He just killed them. The alley was painted red in seconds. Sansa looked up at him, shaking. "Why did you come for me?" He wiped his blade, not meeting her eyes. "Because the boy would be useless without you." He carried her back to the castle like a sack of flour, tossed her into Maester Pycelle's arms, and vanished into the night. When Joffrey saw her bloodied and bruised, his face changed. Not to pity, not guilt, but something worse. He was quiet. Too quiet. Later, in the empty throne room, Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne while Sandor stood below. "I couldn't control them," Joffrey said, voice low. Sandor said nothing. "I'm the king," and they laughed. They threw shit. They touched her. Still silence. Joffrey's knuckles whitened on the iron. "I want them to suffer." Sandor looked up. "They already are. They live in your kingdom." And for the first time, the boy king smiled. Not wide, not happy. Just the kind of smile that says, "I'm not going to forget this." The scent of fire still clung to the Red Keep days after the riot. Burned flesh. Charred wood. The city was wounded, and its king, once a careless boy, now moved through the halls like a shadow made flesh. Joffrey didn't speak much anymore. Not in public. He listened more than he talked. Watched. Calculated. It terrified the court. They had grown used to his tantrums, his cruelty out in the open. Now it was different. Now his cruelty was patient. It started with Ser Dontos. The drunken knight had embarrassed himself at a feast, stumbling and slurring before collapsing in front of the queen. Joffrey's old self would have had his head removed by the time dessert arrived. But this time, he didn't. He pardoned Dontos publicly, gave him wine, called him fool, laughed with him, even let him live. The court relaxed. But days later, when no one was watching, Dontos was found hanging in the stables. Not beheaded, not beaten, just dead, his mouth stuffed with feathers, like the fool he was. No one said a word, but everyone understood. This was a new kind of king. And behind him, always, the Hound. But Sandor was changing too. Quiet, restless. There was something in his eyes now. Doubt. Like he was watching his own reflection in the boy's cruel smile and not liking what he saw. He began drinking more, sleeping less, avoiding Sansa, avoiding the king even. But he couldn't stay away forever. Not when Joffrey summoned him to the dungeons. The cells were dark, damp, and stinking. In one of them, a starving man clung to the bars, begging, "Please, please, I only stole bread from my daughter." "Let him out," Joffrey ordered. Sandor hesitated. "He's a beggar," the Hound grunted. "He's nothing." "That's the point," Joffrey said, eyes bright. "No one will miss him." Sandor unlocked the cell. The man collapsed, sobbing thanks. Bring him to the courtyard. There, with the sun high and the court gathered, invited under the lie of a celebration, Joffrey made a show of justice. The man stood barefoot, weak and trembling. This man stole bread, Joffrey announced. What should a king do to a thief? Silence. No one dared speak. Not after Dantos. Joffrey looked at Sansa, seated near the queen. What do you think, Lady Stark? She looked up, startled. Your Grace, he was starving. Then he should have starved with honor. He turned to Sandor. Your sword. Sandor handed it over, but his jaw clenched. Joffrey walked to the beggar, sword dragging in the dirt. The man collapsed, hugging his knees, tears spilling. Please. Joffrey paused, then looked up at the crowd and handed the sword back to Sandor. You do it, he said, smiling. I want them to know even my dog bites on command. The silence was deafening. Sandor stared at him for one breath, two. Then, without a word, he swung. Blood sprayed across the stones. The beggar twitched. Then nothing. Joffrey clapped once, then turned and walked away. That night, Sandor didn't return to his chamber. He went to the stables, drank half a bottle of ale, and stared at the horses like they had answers he didn't. Sansa found him there. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him drink in silence. Then she whispered, You hate him. Sandor didn't look at her. I made him. No, you protected him. Same thing. No, she said again, firmer. Protecting someone doesn't mean turning them into a monster. Sandor turned then. His eyes were glassy, tired, angry. You think he'd be better off with the others? He growled. Jaime? Sir Boros? He'd have been worse. I taught him to survive. And now he knows how to kill, Sansa replied, but not when to stop. They stared at each other, broken pieces of different puzzles. He didn't answer. He just drank more. That same night, Joffrey stood on the balcony of his chambers, looking out over the city. The fires from the riot had been put out, but something darker was burning now. Inside him, the Iron Throne had always cut those who dared to sit on it too confidently. Joffrey was no exception. His palm bore a thin, fresh slice across the skin from just the day before. But instead of flinching when it happened, he'd smiled at the blood, watching it drip down like it was proof of something. He was changing. And so was the court. Since the riots, he'd begun calling late-night meetings with only a select few. Varys, Littlefinger, Pycelle. He dismissed the others. Even Tyrion found himself shut out more and more often. Whispers filled the halls. Joffrey was building something, but no one knew what. Sandor knew better than to ask. Until one night, the king himself told him. They stood in the throne room alone. Moonlight spilled in through the tall windows, casting long shadows over the Iron Throne like skeletal fingers. They all think I'm still a boy, Joffrey said softly, circling the base of the throne. Even now, even after all I've done. He stopped, turned to Sandor. But you don't. Sandor didn't answer. You've watched me grow. You've taught me more than any maester or knight ever could. You showed me the truth, that power doesn't come from birth or love. It comes from fear, from control. Sandor's brow furrowed. There was something in the boy's voice, no, the king's voice now, that sounded too much like pride, too much like madness wrapped in clarity. Joffrey took a slow step forward. I'm going to remake this court, Sandor. No more traitors. No more weaklings. I'll root out every liar, every snake. I want loyalty, fear, and fire. He paused. I want you to be my hand. Sandor blinked. You're joking. I'm not. You want a dog as your hand? I want the only man who's never lied to me, Joffrey said. You don't bow, you don't flatter, and you don't play games. You just do what needs to be done. Sandor stepped back, almost disgusted. I'm no lord. You'll be more than that, Joffrey said. You'll be the one they all fear even more than me. That silence again. the kind that made the walls feel tighter, and for the first time in years, Sandor Clegane was afraid, not of Joffrey, but of himself, because some part of him, some dark, angry part, wanted it. That night Sandor didn't sleep. He walked the halls of the Red Keep like a ghost, memories haunting every step. His brother's laughter, the fire, the screams of the man in the courtyard, Sansa's voice, calling him more than a dog. And when morning came, he didn't answer the summons to the throne room. Instead, he went to the godswood. He never prayed, but this time he knelt. Far away in the castle, Joffrey sat alone on the throne, crown heavy on his brow, waiting. Hours passed, and then the killing started. It began with Pycelle, found strangled in his chambers, face bloated, eyes wide with betrayal. Next came Lancel, poisoned during his patrol, his skin turning black as he gasped for air in the barracks. Varys vanished, just vanished, and in the heart of it all, Joffrey sat on the throne with blood on his fingers and a look in his eyes that said, "I'm cleaning house." Tyrion stormed in the next day, rage boiling. "What is this? You're tearing the court apart." Joffrey smiled faintly. "I'm not tearing it apart, Uncle. I'm fixing it." "You murdered them." "I removed threats. Pycelle leaked to Stannis. Lancel was loyal to Cersei. Varys, well, no one ever really trusted him, did they?" Tyrion slammed his goblet down. "You think you're clever, but you've started something you can't stop." "I know exactly what I started," Joffrey said, standing. "And if you're not careful, you'll end up like them." Tyrion laughed bitterly. "You've gone mad." "No," Joffrey said, walking past him. "I've gone free." Later, Sandor stood in the courtyard, watching smoke rise from the Tower of the Hand. Joffrey had offered it to him again, the position. This time the Hound didn't refuse, but he didn't accept either. He just asked one question. "If I say yes, who do I become?" Joffrey smiled like the devil himself. "You become exactly what the realm needs." The ashes from the Tower of the Hand still floated in the wind, a quiet reminder that power in King's Landing now came not through legacy, but through fear. Joffrey was no longer hiding behind titles or bloodlines. He had carved his rule in shadow and blood, and the court had started to kneel. Except one, Cersei Lannister. She'd been quiet after the deaths. Too quiet. Her usual venom masked under wine and forced smiles. But her eyes, sharp, golden, unforgiving, never left her son for long. She had raised a monster, yes, but not her monster anymore. Something had shifted, and she felt it. So, she acted. Late one evening, as the Red Keep slept and the moon painted the halls silver, Cersei summoned Tyrion in secret. "We must kill him," she whispered, her face pale but firm. Tyrion stared at her. "He's your son." "And now he's a threat to everything," she hissed. "He's executing the small council like game pieces. He sent Myrcella away, ignores Tommen, and he's poisoned half the nobility with fear." "You created this," Tyrion snapped. "You let the Hound raise him like a wolf cub." "I was trying to protect him," she said bitterly. "Now I have to protect everyone else from him." Tyrion leaned back. "And what do you want from me?" "You're clever," Cersei said. "You always were. I want you to find a way. Quietly. Before he crowns that scarred dog of his and burns this whole city to the ground." But someone else had already begun to make plans of their own. Sansa Stark. She had grown quieter since the riots, more calculating behind her soft eyes. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She smiled politely. She bowed when expected. She wore her silks and jewels like armor, but she had learned the game. One night, she slipped a note beneath Sir Loras Tyrell's chamber door. A simple message. He will never marry Margaery. He wants to rule alone. That same morning, a raven left for Highgarden. And while the Tyrells whispered in private chambers and plotted in silk-lined halls, Joffrey sat in his throne room sharpening a dagger slowly, methodically. Not a gift, not a royal blade, just a plain, sharp dagger. You think they'll try something? He asked, not looking up. Sandor stood near the base of the throne, arms folded, brow low. They always try something, he muttered. Even rats bite when cornered. Joffrey smiled. Let them bite. I've got teeth too. But Sandor didn't smile. He watched the boy who once cried when his leg was scraped, who used to hide behind guards and scream for justice he didn't understand, now sharpened steel with calm, cold purpose. Something was wrong. Not just with the court, with Sandor. He hadn't slept in days. Nightmares gnawed at him, not of fire, not of his brother, but of Joffrey's eyes. How they didn't blink when men screamed, how they didn't move when heads rolled. And then came the final push. A servant boy, 12, maybe 13, was dragged into the throne room one afternoon, beaten and bloodied. He had spilled wine on Joffrey's cloak. That was all. Sansa stood nearby, her hands trembling as she recognized the boy. He was the one who had once helped her sneak a lemon cake from the kitchens. Your Grace, he's just a child, she whispered. Joffrey didn't answer. He nodded at the Hound. Do it. Sandor stared at him. You want me to kill a boy? For wine? He disrespected the king, Joffrey said calmly. And if I let him live, others will follow. Small disobedience becomes large defiance. Sansa stepped forward. Please. Sandor didn't move. Joffrey's voice sharpened. That's an order. And in that moment, Sandor felt it. The break. All these years protecting the boy, teaching him, forging him like steel in the flames of cruelty and fear. He hadn't saved Joffrey. He'd become him. Sandor dropped his sword. No, he said quietly. Joffrey's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I said no. The court gasped. Even the guards froze. I've done enough, Sandor said. I won't kill for your pride. Not anymore. Joffrey stood slowly, dagger still in hand. You forget your place. I remember it too well, Sandor growled. I was your shield, not your butcher. For a moment, the boy king and the scarred knight stared at each other, and then Joffrey said something no one expected. You're free. Just like that. No threats, no execution, just those two words. You're dismissed, Hound. Go. Die in a ditch for all I care. And as the guards parted and Sandor walked out, no chains, no blood, he realized something terrifying. Joffrey didn't need him anymore. He had become everything Sandor had feared the world to be. The Red Keep had never been quieter. The halls, once filled with the sound of clanking armor, servants' chatter and noble whispers, now echoed with something heavier, anticipation. Everyone felt it. Something was coming. Something ugly. Sandor Clegane was gone. And the king had said nothing. No manhunt, no execution order, no outburst. He just sat on the Iron Throne, alone with his dagger and his silence, like a spider waiting for the next fly to fall into his web. Cersei had waited long enough. Her plan was already in motion. On the morning of the feast for the visiting Tyrells, she entered the king's chamber wearing a lion's smile. The wine was already poured. The cup on Joffrey's table had a faint scent of bitter almonds, just enough. He didn't touch it. Is something wrong, Mother? He asked, staring at her hands. She smiled wider, trying to keep her breath steady. Nothing at all, my sweet boy. Only that you've grown so strong. Strong enough, he said, pushing the cup toward her, to know not to drink first. Cersei froze. Then, slowly, he pulled a small scroll from beneath his sleeve and tossed it to her. It was a letter, a copy of one she had sent to Tyrion, instructing him to kill the king quietly and name Tommen ruler instead, with her as queen regent. Her blood went cold. Where did you get this? She whispered. I have more spies than you think, Joffrey said, calm as ice. Varys may have vanished, but he trained plenty of little birds before he did. She stood there, stunned. Then guards entered, 6 of them, fully armed. She backed up. You wouldn't dare... I'm not having you executed, Mother, Joffrey said with a smirk. That would be cruel. Relief touched her face for a moment, until he finished. I'm sending you to Casterly Rock. With guards, with chains. You can be Queen of Stones for all I care. She lunged toward him, but the guards grabbed her. You need me, she shrieked. You're just a boy! Joffrey stood, walked slowly to her, and leaned close. I was, he whispered. They dragged her away, screaming, spitting, defeated. The court heard every word of it, and not one dared speak. That night, a new seat was built beside the Iron Throne, not for a hand, but for a queen, and Sansa Stark was invited to sit in it. She didn't accept right away. She paced her chambers for hours, heart racing, hands shaking. Was this a trap? But when she arrived the next morning, she saw something different in Joffrey. Not warmth, not kindness, but something almost like need. I want a kingdom that survives, he said to her, not looking at her face. Not one that bleeds out in the mud. I need someone they trust. And right now, they trust you. Sansa narrowed her eyes. And what do you want from me? Joffrey turned to her slowly. I want you beside me, as a symbol, as a queen, as someone who doesn't flinch when blood is spilled. She swallowed hard. You think I don't flinch? I know you don't. Not anymore. It was both a compliment and a curse. She sat, and the court gasped. In one move, Joffrey Baratheon had sent away his mother, destroyed the small council, exiled his enemies, and crowned the daughter of his deadliest rival as queen-to-be, and all without lifting a sword. But far beyond the walls of King's Landing, trouble stirred. Sandor Clegane rode alone through the riverlands, cloak torn, blade dull, but eyes still sharp, and in the shadows of a burned-out tavern, he was met by a rider in black armor. A familiar voice spoke, rough, cautious. You trained the wolf cub too well. Sandor didn't flinch. Too well to leash now. The rider tossed a scroll toward him, sealed in gold wax, a raven's mark. Sandor opened it, read slowly, then spat in the dirt. They're mad, he muttered. What will you do? The rider asked. Sandor sheathed his sword. What I should have done years ago. He turned his horse back toward the capital, back to the boy, back to the throne. The sky over King's Landing was gray that morning, thick with smoke and the promise of something breaking. The sea winds carried the stench of the city inward, and crows gathered on the towers like heralds of death. Inside the Red Keep, the silence was deeper than ever. Sansa stood at the balcony of her new chambers, dressed in Lannister red and gold. Ironic, considering how much blood of her house had been spilled by the people in these colors. The crown was still a promise, not yet placed on her head, but everyone already bowed when she passed. Everyone watched their words, even the guards. She had become the face of the new rule. But deep down, she knew it wasn't rule, it was survival. Behind her, the door creaked open. Joffrey stepped in, dressed in black, no armor, no crown, just a dagger at his hip and a strange stillness in his steps. You haven't spoken to me in 3 days, he said. I've had nothing to say, she answered, not turning. He stepped beside her, looking out at the city. The people love you more than me. She finally looked at him. They don't love me. They hate you less when I smile. A beat of silence. Then, to her surprise, he laughed, quiet, bitter. That's the truth, isn't it? He said. They'll never love me. You never gave them a reason to. He looked at her for a long time. But you did. There was something in his voice that almost sounded human. Almost. I need you, he said softly, not just for show, for balance. You calm what I unleash. And that's when the explosion shook the keep. It wasn't wildfire, no green, just stone, dust, screams. Joffrey rushed to the window. The front gates of the Red Keep were shattered. Guards were already running. And through the smoke, riding a black horse, came Sandor Clegane, alone, no army, just him, covered in dirt, eyes burning, sword drawn. Joffrey's lips twisted. He came back, Sansa whispered. For you? No. Joffrey said darkly. Against me. By the time Sandor reached the throne room, the guards had tried to stop him, tried and failed. 2 lay dead. 1 limped away, holding his bleeding face. He pushed open the great doors alone. Joffrey waited for him at the base of the Iron Throne. No crown, no army, just the dagger in his hand. Sansa was already there, standing behind the throne, watching it unfold like a prophecy coming true. You trained me, Joffrey said, stepping forward. I did, Sandor growled. You taught me fear. Sandor's voice was low, raw. I thought it would make you strong, not sick. You're wrong, Joffrey said, his eyes almost gleaming. It made me a king. You're not a king, Sandor snapped. You're a child with a knife who learned how to cut before he learned how to think. Yet I sit on the throne. You sit on a pile of corpses. They circled each other now, like beasts in a pit. You killed for me, Joffrey said. You broke me. So why are you here? Sandor raised his sword slowly. Because I want to be the man who undoes it. Joffrey rushed first, blade quick, wild. Sandor blocked, parried, shoved him back like a swatting bear. Joffrey stumbled, but recovered fast, slashing again. This time, Sandor let him strike, just a graze to the arm. Still just angry, Sandor growled. Still just loud. Joffrey lunged again. This time the dagger went for the neck. Sandor turned, caught the wrist, twisted. The dagger clattered to the floor. Joffrey dropped to his knees, and for a moment it looked over. But then he laughed. You won't kill me, he said, panting, bloodied. You don't have it in you. Sandor stood over him, sword raised. You're right, he muttered. I don't. And he turned the blade and dropped it. Gasps echoed across the throne room. Sansa stepped forward, stunned. I don't need to kill you, Sandor said, backing away. You've already destroyed everything you could have been. Joffrey stared up at him, breathing hard. Coward. No, Sandor said. I'm free. And he walked away. For the second time. This time, not dismissed. This time, he chose it. Joffrey sat there for a long time, on his knees, in his hall, uncrowned. And when he finally stood, he didn't shout. He didn't call for guards. He walked back to the throne, alone, and sat in silence. No crown, no court, just iron and the ghosts he'd made. Sansa watched him for a long moment before turning and leaving the hall. Later that night, she stood at the balcony again, hair blowing in the wind. Eyes fixed on the torn city. A voice behind her said softly, He won't last long now. She didn't turn. No, but he'll fall quietly. And somewhere in the Riverlands, Sandor Clegane rode beneath a blood-red sky, heading north. Not as a knight, not as a dog, but as a man who had finally walked away from the fire.